The War of the First Men and the Children of the Forest is an ancient war that fundamentally shaped the history and landscape of Westeros. Dating back nearly 12,000 years before the events of the main series, the First Men, who were a race of humans that migrated from the eastern continent of Essos, used the land bridge known as the Arm of Dorne to cross the ocean and claim the land known as Westeros for themselves. They were a warrior people and had bronze weapons, also bringing their own gods along with them. The only intelligent inhabitants on Westeros before the First Men arrived were the indigenous Children of the Forest, who are a mythical non-human race deeply connected to nature and the old gods. Shortly after the First Men arrived, they began to cut down trees, and this included weirwood trees, which were sacred to the children and connected to their magic. The children of course didn't like this and retaliated, resulting in the beginning of this war. The conflict lasted for centuries, and their children would use their powerful nature-based magic, including the ability to control animals and create devastating natural disasters, while the First Men relied on their superior numbers and weaponry. Amidst the relentless fighting, both sides eventually recognized that continuous conflict would only lead to mutual destruction, and this realization led to the signing of a peace treaty that was mediated by the Green Seers of the Children and the Wise Men of the First Men. The pact established a truce, with the First Men agreeing to only inhabit open lands, and the Children agreeing only to live in the deep forest. The signing of this pact marked the end of open hostilities and initiated a period of peace and cooperation, with the First Men adopting many aspects of the Children's culture, including their gods, leading to the First Men starting to worship the old gods of the forest. Over time, the two races coexisted relatively peacefully, and the First Men even integrated some of the children's magical knowledge into their own practices. The Long Night is one of the most legendary and terrifying events in the history of Westeros, shrouded in mystery and myth. Occurring over 8,000 years before the events of the main series, and catastrophic drop in temperatures, plunging the world into a prolonged and seemingly endless winter. This period of darkness and cold, which lasted a generation, brought immense suffering to the people of Westeros, leading to widespread famine and death. Amidst the darkness and cold, a new and even more terrifying threat emerged: the White Walkers. These otherworldly beings, which were initially created by the Children of the Forest as a weapon against the First Men, turned against their creators and all living beings. The White Walkers were nearly invincible, impervious to most weapons, and capable of raising the dead to fight for them. Panic and despair spread as entire villages and towns fell to the undead horde. In response to this existential threat, the people of Westeros united as never before. According to legend, the First Men and the Children of the Forest set aside their differences to fight the White Walkers together, and this alliance led to the formation of the Night's Watch. Key figures such as the Last Hero and Azor Ahai, a legendary warrior believed to have wielded a magical sword called Lightbringer, played crucial roles in the struggle. The Long Night finally came to an end when the White Walkers were defeated and driven back to the far north. Using the magic and combined effort of the First Men, as well as giants, the wall was constructed to prevent the return of the White Walkers and to protect the realms of men. The end of the Long Night brought the return of sunlight and warmth, allowing life to resume in Westeros, and the tales of this dark period were passed down through generations, becoming the basis of many myths and prophecies. However, the fear of the White Walkers and the Long Night never entirely faded, lingering in the collective memory of humans and serving as a reminder of how fragile civilization, especially at the face of supernatural threats, really is. The coming of the Andals marks a transformative era in the history of Westeros, beginning around 6,000 years before the events of the main series. Originating from the eastern continent of Essos, the Andals were a warrior people who worshipped the gods of the faith of the Seven. Driven by a combination of wanting to spread their religion and also searching for new lands, they crossed the narrow sea to Westeros, landing on its eastern shores. Armed with iron weapons and wielding superior technology, they quickly began their conquest. The arrival of the Andals sparked a series of violent conflicts with the indigenous people of Westeros, particularly the First Men, who had long established their own kingdoms and culture. The Andals, with their iron weapons and advanced military tactics, steadily advanced inland, and they introduced their faith, which gradually replaced the worship of the old gods in many parts of Westeros. The First Men who resisted were often slaughtered, and those who surrendered were integrated into Andal society. The Andal invasion was not a single unified campaign, but rather a series of invasions over multiple centuries, and they established numerous kingdoms, each ruled by their own kings. Their influence spread from the Vale of Arryn, which is where they first landed, all the way to the Riverlands, the Stormlands, and beyond. Despite fierce resistance, including legendary battles and heroic last stands, the First Men were eventually overwhelmed in most regions except for the north, where the old gods and the ways of the First Men remained dominant. By the end of the Andal invasion, the cultural and political landscape of Westeros had been fundamentally changed, and the Seven Kingdoms, as they came to be known, were largely ruled by Andal lords who had established new dynasties. The north, now ruled by House Stark, remained the stronghold of the First Men's traditions and the old gods, creating a lasting cultural divide between the north and the rest of Westeros. The legacy of the Andals is deeply ingrained in the noble houses, the laws, and the customs of Westeros, laying the foundation of the complex complex political landscape encountered in the current era of the series. The Ghiscari Wars, a series of 5 brutal conflicts that began 8,000 years before the events of the series, lasted for thousands of years, shaping the ancient history of Essos. These wars were fought between the old empire of Gis and the rising freehold of Valyria, 2 powerful civilizations vying for dominance. The Ghiscari, known for their vast slave armies and formidable brick cities, were led by the Harpy, which was their symbol of strength and unity. Their capital, Old Gis, stood as a testament to their power and influence, and in the First War, the Ghiscari sought to assert their supremacy over Valyria, who at the time were just starting to establish themselves. Even though the Ghiscari were a much more developed nation in comparison, the Valyrians wielded dragons, and because of this, they easily repelled the Ghiscari invaders. The dragon's firepower proved to be a game changer, giving the Valyrians a decisive advantage. Despite the initial setbacks, the Ghiscari persisted, launching 4 more wars that lasted over multiple centuries. And these wars saw fierce fighting, with the Ghiscari employing their massive slave legions and elaborate fortifications against the dragon lords of Valyria. The turning point came in the 4th and 5th wars, where the Valyrians fully harnessed the might of their dragons, devastating Ghiscari armies and laying waste to their cities. The 4th war saw the fall of several key Ghiscari strongholds, while the 5th and final war culminated in the complete destruction of Old Gis. The Valyrians razed the city, leaving nothing but ruins, and sowed the land with salt to ensure it could never rise again. With the fall of Old Gis, the Ghiscari Empire was effectively dismantled, and its remnants were absorbed into the expanding Valyrian freehold. The Valyrians enslaved the surviving Ghiscari and integrated their territories, establishing a new order in Essos. The once mighty Ghiscari Empire was reduced to a memory, and its culture and legacy were overshadowed by the dominance of Valyria, with them now completely unchallenged and continuing to expand their influence. The Ghiscari Wars demonstrated the transformative power of dragons and marked the rise of Valyria as the main force of Essos, reshaping the continent's political and cultural landscape for generations to come. The Rhoynish Wars were a series of devastating conflicts that took place about 1,000 years before the events of the main series between the Valyrian freehold and the Rhoynar, who were a group of people that lived along the immense Rhoynar River in Essos, being led by warrior princes and princesses. They were known for their strong connection to the river, their advanced cities, and their powerful water magic, often channeled by their priestesses, who were known as the Water Witches. Initially, the Rhoynar lived in relative peace, but as the Valyrian freehold expanded, they began to intrude on Rhoynar territories, seeking to conquer and subjugate them. The conflict escalated dramatically when Prince Garin the Great of the Rhoynar united many of the river's cities to resist Valyrian aggression. In a bold and ambitious campaign, Garin led a massive army against the Valyrians, achieving early victories. However, the Valyrians responded with their dragon lords, leading to devastating blows on the Rhoynish forces and cities. Garin's army was ultimately crushed, and the once thriving cities along the Rhoyne were left in ruins, with the survivors facing enslavement or extermination. In the wake of these crushing defeats, Princess Nymeria of Nysar, one of the last remaining leaders of the Rhoynar, made a fateful decision. Refusing to surrender to Valyrian tyranny, she gathered her people and set out on an expedition across the sea. Commanding a fleet of 10,000 ships, Nymeria led her people on a perilous journey, enduring many hardships and wandering for years in search of a new home. After many trials, Nymeria's fleet finally arrived in Dorne, and she formed an alliance with Mors Martell, the ruler of the Dornish city of Sunspear, and together they united the fractured Dornish lords and established a new cohesive kingdom. Nymeria married Mors Martell, and their combined forces secured control over Dorne through a series of wars and political maneuvers. Nymeria's leadership in the integration of the Rhoynar culture with that of the Dornish fundamentally transformed the region, and the new kingdom of Dorne became known for its unique blend of Rhoynish and Dornish customs, laws, and traditions, enduring as a distinct and vibrant part of Westeros. Although the Rhoynish Wars led to the destruction of the once great Rhoynish cities, they also ultimately led to the creation of Dorne as we know it, with Nymeria's legacy living on through House Martell. The Century of Blood, a period of prolonged chaos and warfare, began with the fall of the Valyrian freehold. In 102 BC, the doom of Valyria occurred, destroying the capital city and nearly all the dragon lords. The sudden collapse of the Valyrian freehold left a power vacuum in Essos, with many former Valyrian territories and client states seeking to assert their independence or expand their influence. The free cities, which had been colonies of Valyria, fought amongst themselves and against other rising powers. Notable among them were Braavos, which had always been independent, and Volantis, which sought to rebuild the Valyrian Empire under its control. Volantis waged aggressive campaigns to conquer neighboring cities, igniting fierce resistance. Cities like Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh formed alliances to counter Volantis' ambitions, resulting in a bloody struggle. Meanwhile, the Dothraki emerged as a significant force, and under the leadership of Khal Timo, as well as his successors, the Dothraki began to raid and conquer vast pieces of land in the Central Plains. Their invasions brought destruction to many cities and left a lasting impact on the political landscape of Essos. In Slaver's Bay, the former Ghiscari cities, including Meereen, Yunkai, and Astapor, War saw renewed conflicts as they fought for dominance in the absence of Valyrian oversight. After 100 years, the Century of Blood gradually came to a close as new powers solidified their positions and borders stabilized. The Free Cities, having fought off Volantis and other threats, established themselves as independent and influential entities, each with its own distinct culture and government. Braavos, in particular, rose to prominence as a powerful and wealthy city-state, and the Dothraki, despite their initial successes, eventually saw their expansion slow as they reached the natural limits of their power. They continued to be a formidable presence in Essos, but their influence became more contained. In Slaver's Bay, the Ghiscari city settled into a new status quo, with the practice of slavery continuing to define their economies and societies. The power dynamics established during the Century of Blood persisted into the present day of the series, shaping the complex political and cultural landscapes of Essos. Aegon's conquest, also known as the Wars of Conquest, marks the unification of the Seven Kingdoms of Westeros under House Targaryen. The conquest began in 2 BC when Aegon, along with his sister wives, launched an invasion from Dragonstone, and the Targaryens possessed 3 dragons, Balerion, Vhagar, and Meraxes, giving them a decisive military advantage. Aegon landed at the mouth of the Blackwater Rush and established the Aegon Fort, the site that would later become King's Landing. His initial campaigns targeted the Stormlands, the Reach, and the Riverlands, and he defeated King Argilac the Arrogant of the Stormlands at the Battle of the Last Storm, securing the loyalty of House Baratheon through marriage. In the Riverlands, Aegon garnered the support of House Tully, as well as other river lords, by overthrowing Harren the Black, whose massive castle, Harrenhal, was destroyed by Dragonfire. The decisive battle of the conquest was the Field of Fire, where Aegon and his sisters faced the combined forces of King Mern IX of the Reach and King Loren of the Rock. The Targaryens unleashed their dragons, decimating the opposing forces, and securing the submission of House Lannister and House Gardener, the latter of which was wiped out, with House Tyrell rising in their stead. In the north, Torrhen Stark, the King of the North, saw the futility of resistance and chose to bend the knee, and the Vale of Arryn also submitted after Visenya flew her dragon to the Eyrie, compelling young King Ronald Arryn to surrender. The final phase of the conquest focused on Dorne, which resisted Targaryen rule through guerrilla tactics and evasion, maintaining its independence for another century. Despite this, Aegon was crowned as the first king of the Seven Kingdoms, ultimately solidifying his rule. He established the Iron Throne, forged from the swords of his defeated enemies, and Aegon's conquest brought an end to centuries of fragmented rule, establishing a centralized monarchy that set the stage for the political and cultural development of Westeros. The Targaryen dynasty would rule for nearly 3 centuries, leaving a lasting legacy on the continent. The conquest demonstrated the unprecedented power of dragons and the importance of strategic alliances, forever changing the course of Westerosi history. The Faith Militant Uprising was a significant conflict in the history of Westeros, marking a clash between the Crown and the Faith of the Seven. The roots of the uprising can be traced back to the reign of King Aenys Targaryen I, who was the son of Aegon the Conqueror. Aenys, a weak and indecisive ruler, faced growing discontent from the Faith of the Seven, which was the dominant religion in the realm. The Faith was angered by the Targaryens' incestuous practices. This ultimately escalated into open rebellion when King Aenys died and Maegor I seized the throne. Maegor, a ruthless and formidable warrior, faced the full wrath of the Faith Militant, the military arms of the Faith of the Seven. The Faith Militant took up arms against the Targaryens, seeing their rule as blasphemy that must be eradicated. Maegor ended up responding with brutal repression, and he raised septs, executed septons, and unleashed his dragons against the Faith Militant. The ensuing conflict was marked by savage battles, massacres, and widespread destruction. Maegor's cruelty only fueled the resolve of the Faith Militant, leading to a very bloody struggle, and the rebels were given widespread support amongst the small folk, who viewed the Faith Militant as protectors of the true faith and defenders against the Targaryens' tyranny. The uprising reached its climax when Maegor's harsh methods began to alienate his supporters, leading to dwindling resources. The conflict finally ended during the reign of King Jaehaerys Targaryen I, Maegor's nephew, and Jaehaerys took a different approach, seeking to restore peace and stability. He negotiated with the Faith, offering pardons and making concessions, such as disbanding the Faith Militant and reaffirming the crown's support for the Faith of the Seven. The Great Council of 47 AC formally ended the conflict, with Jaehaerys pardoning those who had fought against the Targaryens and agreeing to a series of reforms that appeased the Faith. The disbandment of the Faith Militant marked the end of their military power, ensuring that the crown retained supremacy over religious authority in Westeros. This resolution brought a lasting peace and helped to restore the Targaryen dynasty's stability, shaping the future relationship between the Iron Throne and the Faith of the Seven. The War of the Stepstones was a significant conflict in the history of Westeros, primarily involving the kingdoms of Westeros and the free cities of Essos. The conflict began in the early years of the reign of King Viserys Targaryen I, when the Triarchy, a powerful alliance of the free cities of Lys, Myr, and Tyrosh, sought to expand its influence by taking control of the Stepstones. These islands, located in the Narrow Sea, were strategically important for trade and military movements. Early on in Season 3, we will see the Battle of the Gullet, which will be a significant naval confrontation unification, and it will no doubt be an insane event that will help shape the outcome of the war. The conquest of Dorne was a significant and prolonged campaign of House Targaryen to bring Dorne under the rule of the Iron Throne. Following the successful unification of the other 6 kingdoms, Dorne remained the only realm that resisted Targaryen rule for over 100 years. In the year 157 AC, King Daeron Targaryen I, also known as the Young Dragon, was determined to succeed where his ancestors had failed and bring the fiercely independent Dornish under the rule of the Iron Throne. He carefully planned the invasion using the might of the Targaryen armies and quickly overwhelmed the Dornish defenses. The Young Dragon's strategy involved a 3-pronged attack, one force led by Lord Lionel Tyrell through the Boneway, another by Lord Oakenfist along the coast, and King Daeron himself leading the 3rd force down the Prince's Pass. His swift and decisive actions led to a series of stunning victories, culminating in the capture of Sunspear, the seat of House Martell. By the end of the first year of the war, Daeron declared Dorne conquered. However, the middle phase of the conquest revealed the challenges of holding Dorne, and despite Daeron's initial success, the Dornish people refused to submit. They resorted to guerrilla warfare and ambushing, making it nearly impossible to maintain control. The harsh terrain, combined with the relentless resistance, resulted in heavy casualties on the Targaryen forces, and in the end, Daeron was ultimately betrayed and killed during a parley, supposedly under a banner of peace. His death marked the collapse of Targaryen control over Dorne, and his successor, King Baelor the Blessed, sought peace by negotiating a marriage alliance, effectively ending the conflict. The conquest of Dorne stands as a testament to the difficulty of subjugating a fiercely independent people and the perils of overambition. The Blackfyre Rebellions were a series of civil wars, originally beginning in the year 196 AC and lasting for nearly 50 years. These conflicts arose from a dispute between the Targaryen crown and the legitimized bastards of King Aegon Targaryen IV, who bestowed the Targaryen ancestral sword, Blackfyre, upon his son Daemon, legitimizing him and setting the stage for a bitter struggle for the Iron Throne. In the beginning, the seeds of rebellion were planted by King Aegon himself, and while he was on his deathbed, he legitimized all of his bastards, including Daemon Waters, who took on the name Blackfyre after the sword that was given to him. Daemon was charismatic, a skilled warrior, and beloved by many in the realm, leading to growing support among the nobility and commoners alike for his claim to the throne. Daemon's supporters believed he was the rightful king, seeing him as the true heir over his half-brother King Daeron II, who they viewed as weak and possibly illegitimate. The middle phase of the conflict saw the first and most significant of the Blackfyre rebellions, and Daemon Blackfyre declared himself king, rallying a large faction of Westerosi lords to his cause. The war culminated in the Battle of the Redgrass Field, a bloody and decisive confrontation, and despite Daemon's skills, his forces were ultimately defeated by the Loyalist army, led by Daeron II's supporters, including his half-brother Brynden Rivers. Daemon was killed in the battle, along with his twin sons, seemingly ending the rebellion. However, the end of the First Rebellion did not bring lasting peace, as the Blackfyre cause lived on through Daemon's surviving descendants, leading to further uprisings and conflicts over the following decades. These subsequent rebellions, though less successful, continued to threaten the stability of the Targaryen dynasty, and the Blackfyre rebellions ultimately became a symbol of the dangers of legitimizing bastards and the enduring legacy of Aegon the Unworthy's reign. Robert's Rebellion, also known as the War of the Usurper, is what led to the fall of the Targaryen dynasty and the rise of Robert Baratheon as a ruler of the Seven Kingdoms. In the beginning, the rebellion was sparked by the alleged kidnapping of Lyanna Stark, who was to be wedded to Robert, by Prince Rhaegar Targaryen. This event led to outrage in the north, especially after Lyanna's brother, Brandon Stark, was executed by King Aerys II, who was also known as the Mad King, when Brandon demanded her release. Aerys then called for the execution of Eddard Stark, Brandon's younger brother, and also Robert Baratheon. This sparked widespread discontent, and several powerful lords, including Jon Arryn of the Vale and Hoster Tully of the Riverlands, refused to comply, raising their banners in open rebellion. The middle of the rebellion saw a series of decisive battles and alliances, and Robert proved to be a formidable leader, winning key victories at the Battle of Summer Hall and the Battle of the Bells. His forces were bolstered by alliances with the Stark, Tully, and Arryn families, and also among many others. The turning point came at the Battle of the Trident, where Robert personally killed Rhaegar Targaryen, smashing his chest in with his warhammer. Rhaegar's death shattered the Targaryen forces, leading to the eventual capture of King's Landing by Lord Tywin Lannister, who had declared for Robert. In the end, the rebellion culminated in the sacking of King's Landing, and Jaime Lannister, a member of the Kingsguard, killed King Aerys II, ending the Targaryen dynasty. Robert was crowned king, marrying Cersei Lannister to solidify the alliance with House Lannister. However, the rebellion left a legacy of bitterness and unresolved tensions, setting the stage for the conflicts that would follow. Robert's reign, though initially unstable, was haunted by the ghost of the past, and particularly the mysterious circumstances surrounding Lyanna Stark's death. The Greyjoy Rebellion, also known as Balon's Rebellion, was a brief but bloody conflict taking place 8 years before the events of the main series. In the beginning, Balon Greyjoy was dissatisfied with the rule of King Robert Baratheon Baratheon, and he declared himself king of the Iron Islands. He sought to restore the old ways, where the Ironborn would raid and conquer instead of being subjects of the Seven Kingdoms. To assert his dominance, Balon launched a series of daring raids along the western coast of Westeros, burning Lannisport and sinking part of the Lannister fleet. His declaration of kingship and also these attacks marked the start of the rebellion, with Balon hoping to draw other discontented lords to his cause. The middle of the rebellion saw a fierce and determined response from King Robert Baratheon, who swiftly mustered his forces to crush the uprising. Robert, with the support of several great houses, including the Starks, Lannisters, and Baratheons, launched a full-scale invasion of the Iron Islands. The fighting was intense, particularly at the Battle of Fair Isle, where the Ironborn fleet were shattered. The decisive blow came when the combined forces of King Robert and Lord Eddard Stark besieged Pike, the Greyjoy stronghold, and the walls of Pike were breached, with Balon's two eldest sons, Roderick and Meryn, being killed in the assault. In the end, the rebellion was swiftly and brutally crushed, and Balon was forced to bend the knee to King Robert, in which he was then allowed to retain his lordship in exchange for his submission. To ensure Balon's future loyalty, Lord Eddard took Balon's youngest son, Theon Greyjoy, as a ward and a hostage. The rebellion's failure left the Iron Islands weakened and Balon bitter, and although his ambitions were minimized, they were not forgotten, as he was waiting for a chance to start yet another uprising. The War of the Five Kings, which takes place during the main series, began with the arrest and execution of Eddard Stark after he discovered the truth about the royal children and tried to expose it. His death leads to an uprising in the north, where Eddard's son Robb is declared king in the north by his bannermen. At the same time, Robert Baratheon's brothers, Stannis and Renly, each declare themselves king of Westeros, challenging Joffrey's claim. Meanwhile, Balon Greyjoy, seeking to exploit the chaos, yet again declares himself king of the Iron Islands and launches another campaign to conquer the north. Joffrey Baratheon, backed by House Lannister, fights to maintain his rule from King's Landing. In the middle of the war sees a series of brutal battles, shifting alliances, and significant political maneuvering. Robb Stark wins several key battles against the Lannisters, but faces internal challenges and betrayal. Stannis Baratheon initially gains ground, particularly with the capture of Storm's End, but suffers a devastating defeat at the Battle of the Blackwater, where his forces are repelled by a combination of Wildfire and a Lannister-Tyrell alliance. Renly Baratheon is assassinated, leaving his followers to join Stannis or the Lannisters, and meanwhile, Balon Greyjoy's forces wreak havoc in the north, taking key strongholds, including Winterfell. In the end, the war devolves into chaos and fragmentation. Robb Stark is betrayed and killed at the Red Wedding, orchestrated by the Lannisters and their new allies, the Freys and the Boltons. Stannis regroups and marches north to face the threat of the Wildlings and the White Walkers, leaving his claim to the throne weakened. Joffrey is poisoned at his own wedding, leading to Tommen Baratheon's coronation, and Balon Greyjoy's rebellion falters as his focus shifts back to the internal struggles of the Iron Islands. The war's conclusion leaves Westeros in ruins, with no clear victor, and the realm is more divided than ever, setting the stage for future conflicts and the looming threat from beyond the wall. Thank you very much for watching this video, and if you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like. Comment down below which of the wars I discussed are your favorite, and subscribe if you would like to see a video where I discuss the key battles in Westerosi history. Thank you again, and goodbye.